Mike, how's it going?
Hey man, it's going great. What's up?
Oh, not much. Welcome to everybody who's watching to the Fkthry show. This is the first time we've ever done it live, so bear with us.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an experiment, so we don't know exactly how it's gonna go. Hopefully, no blue screens, which I already had two of this morning trying to set it up.
Brought to you
So
by Streamlabs. We had to switch to
yeah,
regular OBS.
courtesy. Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, it's gonna be a pretty fun next hour or so. Got a couple of random things we're gonna talk about. What's going on? Concert sucks over there. The man
We're
of the
gonna try.
day.
We're gonna try our best to keep an eye on the chat, but we got a couple topics as well that we're gonna talk about. We've been releasing the episodes now for this is number 4, and all the ones we've released before have been kind of like past episodes, so they've been things we've recorded before. And we haven't actually recorded one since probably a couple months now. So this is like kind of getting back into the groove. And I think we want to do it monthly again while we burn through all the content that we've already recorded.
Yeah, and you can tell the difference between the two because we're both in different houses, and I also have long hair.
Yeah, the intro is like immortalized, I guess, a year ago, what our studios used to look like. But now neither of us are in the same place.
Yeah, the good old upgrade. It's kind of looks like we're in almost the same room just because of the panels you
The
have in the
panels?
background there. Yeah, you've got them vertical like mine, so
Yeah, if I match the lighting.
yeah. And then we just like blurred the line
Yeah.
in between. Yeah. Word. So yeah, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I wanted to talk about your start off with your video that you posted on Instagram yesterday. I was dying about the snakes
man.
and the cables and all that stuff. So I feel the exact same way because I have that same Motu, and it's like I just walked up to it with my microphone with an XLR cable, and I'm like, I can't plug this in. It's all it's all quarter inch. So I bought my answer was I bought an ADAT interface with XLRs on it. So, which is
Yeah. Well, like it's nice having obviously quarter inch because like XLR inputs are massive, so they take up a huge amount of space. So like I get why they would switch everything to quarter inch on like a professional interface like that, but like that doesn't help anyone who's ever been collecting cables or microphones because everything I have is XLR. I have like 500 XLR cables and like one quarter inch adapter. So I'm like, okay. And so like I drums was my first professional instrument, so all I've been trying to do since I started playing was like figure out a way to record them, and it's like one of the most annoying things to ever try and deal with when you're trying to make music. Like guitar is pretty easy. Even if you're recording an amp, all you need is like a decent little box to maintain the sound and like one like SM57 to get like a decent sound. Vocals, same thing. But drums, it's like, oh, hey, so you have a drum set? Okay, well, you're going to need 2 overhead mics, a kick mic, a snare mic, stands for all of those, potentially some tom mics. So you got to invest like hundreds of dollars just to get a bunch of microphones. And then you have to buy all the cables, which are not cheap either. And then you have to have an interface with multiple inputs. The first, in fact, actually the first version of me ever trying to record drums, I used my my giant Yamaha mixing board, and I would mic it like with all of the channels like going left, and then the kick channel going right.
I remember
And
this,
then,
because then that's like
yeah.
you're using it as like a mix bus. You're using the left and right like a mix bus.
Yes, exactly, because I only had 2 inputs on the UX2.
Yeah.
So I had like all of my drums mixed analog, and then just the kick on its own channel, because the kick is obviously like the one where you need to really like sort of separate it and get it kind of balanced to even hear it. So that was a nightmare. And then like ever since then, I've just been like slowly upgrading. Both of us, to answer your question, No Tick, we got Persona's Fire Studios. That was my first like professional interface because back then Firewire was like all the rage when it came to low latency audio recording. Nowadays,
It's still pretty good.
USB 3. Yeah, well, 100%. Except that interface specifically is discontinued.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a nightmare if you're really relying on it, because good luck finding one. And then Joel, how many do you have now? 2 or 3?
I was gonna buy a third one on Craigslist, but the person tried to pull the wool over my eyes. But the thing is, I already own 2 of them, so I like brought everything I needed to fully test it. And the actual FireWire connectors, the way those fail is if you unplug and plug in the FireWire while it's on. FireWire has like it's really old, so it doesn't have proper grounding and things like the new USBs have, and you can actually kill the chip with the static electricity, which is, I mean, that's stupid today. You would like a connector today that does that is like the dumbest thing, but back in the day, that was pretty normal. So I was able to figure out that I didn't need to buy that, but they're pretty cheap. You can pick those up for like $100 each, and you get 8 ins, 8 outs, which is like pretty solid. And the audio quality, you know, it's going to be as good as something like a Scarlett. It's just hard to get them these days, and you need FireWire, so you're spending probably $20 to $30 for a PCIe add-in card if you don't have a Mac, or if you have a new Mac, a lot of adapters.
Yeah. Oh my God, you had so many dongles. But yeah, I remember when I first got the FireWire thing, like the first line in the disclaimer is like, don't have carpets and don't wear socks. No, but for real, they're pretty unstable that way. I actually had my the internal chip fry on that card a while back, and I had to go get it replaced, and it ended up costing me like $90 to get it repaired or something, which is like it's less than buying a whole new interface. But how many times am I going to have to do that? So I upgraded to the Motu 828 ES, which is like a nice full size rack mount. It's got enough inputs to do the drums, but then coming back around to my problem, then I'm like, okay, well, what do? Do I go and buy like 8 quarter-inch to female XLR adapters, or do I go buy a whole bunch of cables that are, like, because they're so expensive. Like, to get one 20-foot cable or 25-foot cable or whatever, that's like, you know, XLR on one side and quarter-inch on the other, is like somewhere around $30. Right? And so I remember like my first experience with making my own cables when I was working for my old boss doing wedding gigs back in the day. He would just buy like spools of cable, and then he had all the, you know, the speak-on plugs and XLR plugs and stuff like that.
New trick.
So yeah, it was nice. He got me to help him like rebuild some of his broken cables, which was fine, because you open it up and it's got like a tiny little screw, and you just put the wire in, and then you just clamp the wire down with the screw. So those exist, but I wanted to get like dual plugs that are like XLR and quarter-inch, so that like if I wanted to, I can use a snake to plug in, you know, a guitar or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be XLR, right? Obviously, if I'm gonna build something, I want as many options as possible.
Wait, so you're saying that it's like one end is 1 and the other end is 2?
Well, no. So the plugs that you have XLR plugs on the front of your Motu, right? Or
no, I just have 16 quarter inches on the back, and then I have an expanded card that like is it's like another Fire Studio, so it's 8 XLRs in and 8 XLR out.
Right. Okay, but you know the plugs on the front of the Fire Studio, how you can put quarter-inch in them and XLR.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I bought those connectors, and then I found out that they're solder only. So literally, it's like, here, I put them right here. Actually, I'll show you. This is ridiculous.
Are you gonna roll around on the floor during the episode?
Yeah, no, not right now. But maybe. Where is it? Oh, I'll just open up another one. Yeah. Okay, apparently I need scissors because it's wrapped in super titanium plastic. But yeah, so check this stupid thing out. So this is the back of it.
What?
This is what it looks like. This is the front, right? Standard.
Oh yeah.
But on the back, we've got 3 of those little things. 3 of those are for the XLR, you know, ground and then hot and neutral, and then 3 of them are also for the TRS. They didn't think to jump it beforehand, and so what I have to do, this is the stupidest thing. So, like, it's hard to be in front of my microphone and show you this at the same time. But essentially, I have to connect like two of these little things together, and then another two of them together, and then another two of them together, so that the TRS and the XLR are going into the same thing, right? I have to actually jump the wires
first,
and they weren't nice enough to place the ones you have to jump together actually next to each other. They actually go like crisscross.
And they can't touch each other, or else you get a short.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, thank God there happens to be like a single YouTube video buried in the depths of YouTube that has one guy showing you how to do it, right?
Shout out to that guy who just like was like, you know what? Somebody else is gonna have this problem. I'm gonna spend 2 hours uploading a video to YouTube that explains this.
Yeah. Well, 100%, right? Because without that, I wouldn't have known which ones are supposed to go to which ones. And like with soldering, it's not like I can test it and then undo it easily. Like I've got melted metal all over the place, right? So,
do you have a multimeter? Because you should probably use that to test. Because that way you can connect the two ends and make sure you don't have a short. You should probably do that if you don't already have one of those. They're pretty handy.
Yeah, I don't know if I have one on hand, but there must be one in the shop that'll be like handy. So yeah, we'll give it a go.
You know, you're getting
I've
deep
never
into
soldered
it when you're
anything.
testing.
Yeah,
with a multimeter.
I've never soldered anything in my life before, so this will be a new experience for me. But I just assembled the housing for it yesterday, or at least I cut the wood into box shapes so that I can assemble a box. It'll look nice when it's done, but hopefully it works also as well as looks nice.
It's funny when you look at it and you build it, you realize like, okay, I kind of know why these cost that much, because of how much labor and pain is it takes to do it. The nice thing about building it yourself though is if there's ever a problem, you can replace a single one, or you can literally take it apart and fix it because you knew how to do it, versus if you buy a snake and it breaks, you're like, you know, if you bought it on Amazon, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, 100%. And like
they want you to record your soldering. Definitely do that.
Yeah, no, and I
Just
will.
Also,
I will definitely
do it in a ventilated room, or else you're gonna get really fucked up.
Really? I was gonna just do it in this room.
No, you got to do like it's because you use flux, which is like, do you have flux?
Like the soldering wire?
I guess you maybe don't need flux, but it's like goo. You probably don't need flux unless you're working on like a PCB or something. But it's not good for your lungs because you're literally burning like a type of it's like tin, and there's some other additives to it that make it better that literally burn. So you want to kind of, or at least vaporize. So I think you don't want to do it in a sealed studio.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, there's no windows in here or vents, so probably
just do it out in the
main
warehouse. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll wear a mask and all the good stuff, you know, just to make sure I don't get solder coronavirus.
Yeah, it's contagious. It's super contagious. It's a real problem in the electrical engineering industry.
Yeah. Not even once.
Not
soldering.
Even once.
Yeah, anti-solder campaign.
Yeah, I think
so. Yeah.
Because I did electrical engineering for a while, and I did some soldering, and it's kind of funny. Well, it was less soldering. It was like more like chips and stuff. And it's funny because as soon as you break something, you know almost immediately. There's a term. It's called the magic smoke, and it's like, oh, the magic smoke left this chip, and it doesn't work anymore. And you smell it too. So like I was making a clock with chips on a breadboard, but I also had built the power supply. Not complicated. It's just you're taking like a sine wave and you're rectifying it using a bridge rectifier. It's not that complicated, but you do it, and I mess it up. So it was not feeding 5 volts. It was feeding like 60 volts into this chip that was only meant for 5 volts. And I just sort of, and it's so quick that you basically can't tell. And it's like, oh, what was that? And then I was like smelling this burning smell, and I just pulled the cable. I'm like, well, tested the chip with a multimeter. I'm like, no, this does not work anymore. And I smell like this little thing. It's like, oh, that one is gone. It is no longer around.
Like I think I have smelled this smell before.
Yeah,
I'm not 100% positive, but yeah, I know what you're talking about, because it's kind of like when a light bulb burns out, like when you just like turn it on and it's just like, and you're like, oh, well, there goes that one.
Yeah, and it's basically burning plastic when it's like the enclosure of those little chips burning, basically, because it's all plastic covering. But yeah,
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I guess electrical engineering is now part of recording drums. So it wasn't something I expected to have to know how to do, but thank God I'm sort of like medium handy.
Yeah. Well, you built like a ton of like did you actually build the studio or I mean you worked with a few people to build the studio that you're in right now?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I could have done it on my own as like if I wanted to, but it's just the time-consuming part. Like, yeah, I know how to build frames and I know how to drywall and I know how to put the floors in and stuff like that. But it would have taken so long. And when we decided to rebuild the studio, I was like, I was in that gray zone process of like moving and like what that's like because you just did it too. And it's like as soon as you get to a certain point where you have to start tearing down the studio, you're like, I can't work until I have the next one set up. And it
Exactly,
was
yeah.
even like extra bad because like I couldn't just set up my like computer in this room and start working right away because I had to treat it first. And there's no reason to start working in an untreated room and like learn what it sounds like just to have to relearn it immediately after when you're done the treatment. So I had
Yeah.
to build all the panels and I had to, treat it and set it up and get everything dialed before I was even able to work. So it put me out of like a studio for about 2 weeks, but it was a very fast process, and I am happy I decided to just pay people to do it quickly because they had it all framed and insulated in a day, which was
Well,
amazing.
carpenters that are carpenters as a main job are so fast is crazy. Like it makes sense, it just like it's crazy to watch them work. It's like nail gun. They just get the frames built
Yeah, oh
so
yeah.
fast. It's pretty crazy. I mean, when you're building a whole building and that's your job, you get pretty quick at it. So I
Yeah,
remember
I
when I worked
literally
on the
left to
site,
go
they were
get
just crazy.
coffee, and I came back, and the walls were up, and I'm like, oh, sweet.
Yeah,
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 so it's good. But yeah. So anyway, I want to build a snake, and then that way I can record my drums because I've had them in here for a long time, and like this is the first time I've ever had enough room in a room where I could even consider setting up my whole drum set and have all the mics and everything going and even just like have fun with it. And there's like you kind of need that flexibility if you're going to try and record a drum set. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time because, like, obviously, just finding samples is like significantly faster. And
yeah.
so, like, why mess with trying to record your own drums when you don't have to? It's like why spend all your time building a synth in Max for Live when it's probably just not going to be as good as using Serum or something, right? But
Is that a stab at
I
me?
no, but because you know how to do it, right? So that's the
Not very
difference. It's
well.
like it's fun, but it's not practical,
Yeah,
right?
I 100%
It's
agree.
like yeah, and it's like it's if it's something that you enjoy doing, it's a different story. But if it's something that you feel like you need to do because it's some sort of necessity, like like everyone uses Serum, I need to build my own synths, like really, like do you really need to, or could you just maybe like learn how to synthesize things instead?
Well, and I do think there is a value to doing that, but it's actually less in that you will use that synth to make music. It's more that by building a synth, you will understand all synths at a much deeper level. And if you can make a synth, learning a new synth is just, it's like you understand the fundamental framework of languages. It's kind of like being a linguist. Like you literally understand how languages are built, which is, I mean, it's literally this is the same as being learning how to make a synth. So I think the value there is like what I've learned is like more about like the underlying technology below it, kind of how the signal path stuff works. And now I think about sound design from like a signal path standpoint, and it's a bit of a different viewpoint that I didn't have before I got into it.
No, 100%. And thinking about things like a linguist is actually a really good analogy because, just like you said, if you study the concept of language in general, when it comes to learning other languages, it's not. It's less like every single language is its own hurdle. It's more like every single language can be related to every other type of language because you can like find the cross-referencing concepts within them. And so learning a new language becomes like a different type of process entirely because you're not learning like just what is special about this language. You're learning like, oh, this language functions this way, which is similar to how this language functions and how this language functions. And so
Yeah.
if you come back to like thinking about like synthesis and sound design, it's like just like you said, if you learn like one synth really well, you'll know how to pretty much use any synth or even any effect or whatever. Like, it's like, if you know how a delay unit functions, like, it doesn't matter which brand of delay unit you're using. Like, you can open up any delay in any VST and be like, oh yeah, there's the feedback knob, and there's the this and that and stuff, and it just makes the process of learning a lot easier.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So what else we got going on here today? There's a new challenge that we're thinking about introducing. You wanna touch base on that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think probably some people that have watched this or are watching it right now will know that we did like a sound design challenge back in September. It was kind of like a trial run to kind of get an idea of what kind of content we'd be creating for this kind of thing, and how much effort it was going to take. Because from our standpoint, like, I have a day job. Mike's got, he's got a ton of work on his plate too. So the key is to kind of like fit it into a silo so that it's not gonna, take too much time, and it like, understand how much work it's going to be. And we did that, and we're like, oh, you know what, we can easily do 3 a week and just 3 random things a week. And I think pretty much a week within it, we're like, my God, this is like hours worth of work. And we're both perfectionists. So I would spend an hour making a sound and then like 2 hours video editing all the content that I recorded from it. And it was like, wow. And then you do that 3 or 4 times a week. And that's like a part-time job basically on top of everything else. And we were kind of thinking like how much value that's bringing. And we got really good feedback. I think people really enjoyed that. But I started to realize that there were better ways to, simplify it and find the core idea behind what we wanted to do there. And what I've wanted to do for a while, and a while being like a couple months now, is essentially make another version of that where it's not a randomized generator, because those are nice, but it kind of gets samey, and you kind of end up just making the same sounds or things that you've done before. And it's also doesn't really relate to anything anybody knows about. A sparkly Death Riser is like, great, probably there is a song that you could use this in, but it's somebody who doesn't listen to music will not care about it at all. And I want to have, I think the idea behind the challenge is that people that are non-musical would still be interested, maybe not do the challenge, but the process is actually still interesting and kind of draws people in that may not be super into sound design, which is, and that may be musicians that are still musical but not really into the sound design process. And to do that, what I've kind of realized would be the best option is actually to do more pop culture sounds. So sounds that people have heard before and, that are in movies or in popular scenes. It could be a jingle from, it could be the Windows XP starting sound. It's like, well, how do you make that?
Yeah.
It's probably not that complicated, but it's still an interesting process. And there are things you could learn along the way. And, evolving from that, we kind of realized that, okay, well, let's try to do it on like a monthly cadence, because that's a lot more doable over the long term.
Yeah.
And the Netflix sound would be cool. I'm trying to think, as soon as I hear a sound in my head, it's like my brain immediately goes after it, trying to think about how to make it. But
yeah.
But yeah, so we're planning on launching that probably in February, so this upcoming month, and it'll be pretty short amount of content. It'll be maybe like 5 minutes split into a couple sections. We'll post first, a teaser of the sound, and then throughout the month we'll basically kind of explain how it's made, as well as kind of the process, the tools that we used, how we got to that endpoint. And then at the end of the month, it would be kind of, we would review other people that did it on the podcast here live. That way, there's something that, monthly, it could be like a recurring thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I want to also, to encourage people to get into it, we're going to be giving a prize. So it's going to be basically, I think, a $50 VST. I have yet to find one that's that cheap that is actually good. I recently bought H delay, so I might grab that. The only problem with that is if people have cracked versions of Waves, it's going to break that. So I don't know if that's 100% a good option. So, but either way, I'm just looking into options, but it would be a $50 prize at the end of the month based on kind of who put in the most effort, got the closest. And, it's not always going to be about somebody just doing it 100% every month. It's going to be like, we want to, the whole idea of this is to bring people that maybe are not as familiar in sound design and get them kind of thinking about things in different ways. So, if it's somebody that is not very familiar, that kind of, doesn't get that close but puts a lot of effort in there, we may want to give them a prize as well. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's also kind of nice having like a less ambiguous like component to the actual process itself, because like you said, if it's just a bunch of random adjectives strung together, then yeah, it's like, okay, let's see how someone approached making this sentence into sound. But like if you have like you were experimenting with like the Star Wars explosion sound, like
the
is there a
seismic
name for that
charge
thing?
from it's the seismic charge. I'm sure people will start to hear that in their head, but it's the seismic charge from I think it's Attack of the Clones, when the bounty hunter, they're getting chased by the bounty hunter. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, no, just it's like if you start with a sound that we're trying to make that like already exists, then I mean you have not only something to compare it to, but then also, just like you said, anyone who isn't a producer might be interested to just see like, oh, like that's cool, like how would someone make this sound? Because some of those sounds are just like unimaginably like random for a lot of people. Like how do you even approach that? And there's a lot of sounds like for me as well that like when I hear it, I'm like, what in the world is going on? Like with music it's different, because like I feel like usually when I hear sound design in people's songs, I kind of understand like where they may have started it from. But when you talk about sounds from like film scoring or even like video games, like there's a lot of sounds that I hear and I'm like, how did they make this sound that somehow so accurately represents this like thing that's happening on screen? And it'll open up like a new area of exploration for us as well, so everybody kind of benefits. And then doing it once a month is a little bit nicer, because the one thing I really noticed about the sound design challenge in the beginning is like I was hoping other people would join us, and even though they didn't, it's fine. Like we got a bunch of our own custom synths out of it during the process, but like between the time of posting that the challenge is happening, it's like unless somebody is actively waiting for us to say, oh, it's time for the sound design challenge, like get your DAWs open and go and make this thing, like there's no way that anyone's going to submit something before we even start the next challenge. And it's like we have people who are just like way behind on it, and it was kind of just too hard to keep up. So we we're going to give a little bit more time.
And I mean, there are a few people that did do it, and shout out to them. So there's a few people, but again, I think the cadence was just too high. And so speaking of the seismic charge, I tried doing that back in September and I couldn't figure it out. And then me and Mike were talking about this again about a month ago in preparation for all this stuff. And he was like, you should start with, I'm not going to say it yet because we're going to kind of lead into it, but essentially I've made the sound. I have the process to make it, and I just have to record basically a video to explain. So that's going to be the first sound, but we're super open to basically suggestions and literally any sound. It can be, it can be from a video game, as long as it's something that if somebody, I think the key to this is somebody could tell you the word of the sound. So in our case, the Star Wars seismic charge, or like the Star Wars blaster, or in your case, the Netflix sound, and people should be able to hear it in their head, or like a large number of people should be able to hear it in their head. And it's like, it's essentially a catchy tone that is already kind of in the public consciousness. So we're going to have a Google form or some kind of a poll system where people can submit what they'd like for the future challenges. The big consideration there is me and Mike have to be able to make the sound. And that can be difficult. So for example, the seismic charge thing, I spent probably 5 hours back in September trying to make it, but I was tacking it from the wrong point. Mike pointed me in the right direction, and then I kind of expanded from there and was able to make the sound. How it will work is essentially I will make the sound, or Mike will make the sound prior to the whole challenge happening, because if we can't, then like you can't have the challenge because we don't know how it is. That being said, if somebody wants to say, hey, I made a sound, and actually send it to us, we're willing to do that as well. And then I can, re-record the process, or we can use somebody else's video to explain how it's made. But essentially, if not, we have to be able to make it. So that's kind of what we want to do. It's basically a monthly thing. I think the first 2 months, I'm just going to give away a $50 prize. We'll do it live on the show. So at the end of, kind of the end of every month. So this is the end of January. At the end of February, we'll have another live episode, and we'll kind of go over some of the sounds. If somebody made videos, we'll watch those and kind of talk about it. And then we'll basically choose a winner. And they'll just get a $50 synth, or, whatever we can find that makes sense. I've actually got a poll for that as well. And that will just basically be what it is. And, in terms of like what prizes people want, but it has to be within $50 Canadian, which is I know that's kind of a tough challenge for audio plugins, but there are some good ones. Shaperbox is a great example, and a couple other ones. So things like that, we really want to do, and that way we can get people excited about doing it. And what's nice is everybody will be trying to make the same sound, and it's over the course of a month. So we want people to help each other out. I'll be on the Discord, and I can also help people out as well because I've kind of cheated by doing the sound ahead of time. So.
Yeah, and I also had an idea for potentially doing some other challenges as well, like a processing challenge, which could be a fun example as well. Just trying to see how close people can guess between two different sounds how Joel or I decided to process something. So what we can do, like for example, like my idea was if like how do you process vocals, right? So it's like if I had like a vocal sample, I can show you guys the dry unprocessed version of it and then show you the finished result version of it, and then we'll get your submissions and see what type of effects chain you used, and like it's kind of like a battleship or something, you know what I mean? It's like, let's see how close people can get to picking the right effects chain in the right order, and see if they get all the settings right, or even and the cool thing about that is it could be as simple as like, hey, I'm just going to use an EQ, see if you can match the curve that I made, and whoever gets the closest gets like a something. Or it can be completely ridiculous, and it's like, here, I processed this one sound and turned it into something else entirely. I used like 10 different effects. Can you guess what they were and the order and the settings? It's like, yeah, maybe. Like, and the cool thing is, like, I could do that as like a long running one, right? It's like, here, I'll introduce this challenge, and it's like, this is a super extra hard mode one, and I'll buy you a ticket to Shambhala if you can get it, And it's like,
I'm gonna be trying to do that one. I'll just hack your computer.
Leave the challenge up. Yeah. You could too, and that's the scary part. But yeah, it's like, just leave it like super complicated, and it's like, it's kind of like a guess the jelly beans amount in the jar of the beans. It's like whoever gets the number wins, and it's like it'll just be there waiting for someone to guess until they finally get it right. And if anyone does, then I think that would be really cool, because that'll be like a long ongoing sort of challenge thing.
Yeah, and you when you first told me about this, you were in a Starbucks line, and you sent me a voice note. You're like, I don't want to forget about this. Please, you didn't even tell me what the idea was. You just said, I have an idea, and I need to remind myself, so I'm sending you this voice note. And your first example, when you actually told, your first example was that it would be like a vocal sample, and I think that's great too, because a lot of vocal editing, we could have like the dry vocal and then the wet vocal, and it's like, how do you get to this wet vocal? And I think that's a really cool one that is probably not that hard unless we go ham on it, but like good vocal processing isn't always intuitive, in a mix and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good one for, being able to learn, and like you win something, or it's just kind of like a simple thing that multiple people can work together on, and then they end up winning something at the end. So yeah, I think it's the goal will be make it not too taxing. I think the once a month or maybe a couple a month, if down the line, if you want to do more of like those side channels and stuff, and then I'll make kind of the core sound design challenge every month, we can kind of find a balance. And one of our members mentioned that it may actually make a good sense to do it on Patreon. So and Patreon meaning that people can basically pay $2 to be part of the challenge. And the reason why I say that is because if we could get more money into this challenge, like say $2 a month from 10 people, it's not that much money. It's like $20. But say we got another $50 a month, I'm still willing to put in the $50 and match it. And then we could get $100 plugins every month. And that's where you're getting into pretty cool territory right away. And then the larger it grows, the larger the prizes are, or we could have first, second, third, most improved, and things like that. So I think at first it's going to be, come join, come do it, see if it's something you like. And we're looking for a lot of feedback on the process too. So I'll be creating some content. Mike will be creating some content for it. We'll be kind of seeing if it's engaging, if it's too crazy, let us know. Obviously we could probably go off on tangents pretty easily. So we want to make it still pretty accessible. And then kind of after 2 or 3 months, we'll kind of switch it into probably a Patreon page with like pretty minimum amount, but it's just so that we can grow it. And potentially it's also like boot camp, you pay $10 to go to boot camp, but it's less about it's less about paying for that person to yell at you. It's also like the accountability. It gets you, when you put a little bit in, it kind of holds you accountable to do the actual thing itself.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to have a little bit more engagement than just like one random person who's like, "Hey, look, I did the thing," and it's like, "Okay, well, you win by default. Here's your free $50 plugin that I just bought."
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, so yeah,
yeah,
awesome. Well, that's the challenge, and I'll be launching one for February, and I'll probably just post it on our Instagram. So follow there or on the YouTube. I mean, it's posted basically everywhere. The podcast, so what we're recording right now will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube after I've been able to kind of clean it up and edit the intro out of it and whatnot. So you can check it out there. We'll probably post details there, or you can, the Instagram is probably the best place for updates. We just kind of post stories and pictures and stuff there if we have something that we need to announce.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Yeah.
So, you wanted to talk about some rendering.
Yeah, well,
you mentioned this.
I can probably just kind of touch on more of an overarching theme. I don't want to play any video right now just because it's going to be too hard, and I think everything's working right now, so let's not mess with it. But maybe I'll edit it in afterwards. But it's kind of, I guess, the underarching concept of, as a music producer, so coming from a background of music, starting to use visuals and 3D renders and essentially video content. So the visual side of it to basically to help inform your music choices, and vice versa. So it's kind of like the feedback loop of visuals and audio. And essentially I'd say over the last 6 months, I've started to get more into a tool called Touch Designer, which is essentially like a 3D compositing tool that allows for, like, if you think about Ableton, it's like you have automation. You can use an envelope follower to take the shape of the sound and then apply that to another parameter. This tool lets you do that with video. So I can take the audio or the MIDI and stuff from Ableton, and I can dump that right into this program and then adjust the video in real time and all kinds of parameters. So you can do transforms, pretty much anything, and it works in real time, which is what's kind of cool about it. But learning a fair bit of Blender for modeling and some other more complicated 3D that's maybe not as reactive. And I've started to, because I've been, we've got Lost in Translation out, and I wanted to kind of come up with what the next thing will be. And I'm not really going to go into what that is yet because I haven't really finalized the idea. But what I wanted to talk about is having a visual component to your music, at least for me, has dramatically helped me solidify what the concept of my idea was. Just thinking about music itself, I was trying to I want to come up with an EP or an idea, and I really wasn't able to come up with something until I started having kind of, exploring some visual ideas and seeing how they kind of match together, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that's something that you've experienced as well, Mike.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. Similarly, like very recently, I was playing drums, and I have these lights in my studio that like react to like incoming audio sounds, and so I turned all my normal lights off and just turned those ones on, and I was just like playing in the dark along to these lights, and I noticed that just based off of the way that they're reacting, it actually forced me to think about the groove I was playing in a completely different way, because I was like experiencing what the visual response was to those grooves like in real time. And so naturally, as a drummer, you end up wanting to play kind of like busy, because like it's always fun to hit more things faster as a drummer. But then I ended up in a situation where the lights are just on the entire time, and I'm like, okay, well, what if I like slow this groove down and give it some more space? You get like some nice pulses, and it actually like influences the way that you see and feel the music as well. And so that kind of inspired me just like to think about the way that I'm writing as well, because in music, it's also quite evident that I like to make things complicated and pretty busy, but inevitably that just kind of makes for something that has less space and kind of locks you into like a specific grid that gives you less freedom to like experiment with when you're like dancing or even just listening to the music in general. Like the more densely complicated something is, the less the less room there is for someone else to interpret it in their own way, right? Like the difference between like minimalism versus like over complexity. You know, if you over explain something, then you're forcing someone to feel something or experience it in exactly the only the one way. But if you leave a certain amount of space, then it adds this layer of ambiguity that lets people sort of interpret things in their own way, which I feel like will kind of allow people to connect with it a little bit more, because they have to interpret it. They have to come up with some bit of their own interpretation, which links them to the music that they're hearing as well. So there is something to be said about visual correspondence when it comes to music, especially when those two things are like working together very well. It really adds like another layer to the experience. And so if you can inspire yourself by looking at visuals, there was even another one that I did where like I was just it wasn't even anything complicated. I was just looking at this like one GIF actually of like this tunnel loop that was like just zooming in forever, and I started like writing while looking at that, and it influenced sort of the way that I was feeling about the music in order to make it feel like you're going through a tunnel. And it just adds like a certain layer of direction, or at least some sort of constant that you can hold on to, that grounds the way that you're thinking while you're trying to create something from scratch.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I found, because I hadn't done any of that stuff before. I hadn't even tried to bring visuals into my music. I was trying to make it almost in a vacuum, and that's very difficult. And having some kind of a, whether it's Hue Lights literally just going to the beat, or somebody else's visuals, or something you're creating yourself, I think there's a huge amount of value to that. That comment about anime AMV, is that something you know about? Is he talking about Surface, the track?
Yes. I someone mentioned it to me. They're like, "Oh, did you know that there's like this thing?" And like, yeah, there's an AMV someone made to Surface that has like, actually, I'm pretty sure they didn't even mention me at all in it. Like,
so they just used the track song for it. Yeah. Did it at least get copyright? Did you get you and Lou get the revenue for it, or no?
No, but it had like 20,000 plays or something. Like that might not be the right number, but it had like a lot, and I'm like, oh great, I'm glad to know that this person got all these views. It's totally fine.
That's just like, hey, you want to send me? Well, on YouTube today, they probably made about 10 cents. So
it's like that post that I put up on Instagram of my SoundCloud payment. I had it on my story. It was like 35 cents USD though. So I got like 40 cents.
So what is the transaction fee? 60. So you end up with minus 30.
I owe SoundCloud money
because they owe PayPal or some payment processor.
Yeah, it's pretty unreal how bad SoundCloud is for paying. Hey, there you go. I'm glad that it introduced you to some other things. So they must have mentioned who I was on the video. I know there's one where somebody uploaded one of my songs and like didn't mention that who it was by or whatever, and they had an ass load of views. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I posted visuals. I was making visuals on Lost in Translation, and it got copyright claimed by myself.
What?
Which is sick. I've never been copyright claimed by my own content. Yeah, it said Westwood Recordings, like the whole thing, and it wasn't even posted. It was unlisted, but I posted the song like directly as to show one of you guys the visuals, and it literally copyrighted myself. But yeah, also fun fact, Littlemore was my old roommate, and I remember he was making that song. He made kind of the bass of Surface just like on a Sunday morning, and he was like, dude, it was on his old like MacBook laptop, and man, you got to produce again. He has so many good ideas. We have to convince him to.
He's actually the one who introduced Joel and I. That's the reason why Joel and I are even friends, is because of Littlemore. So that's actually that's kind of an interesting backstory. But yes, clearly that's definitely not the right video that I'm thinking of. I think it was actually I think someone uploaded like Teleportal or something, and they're just like, Teleportal by Rez. And I'm like, okay, thanks.
That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah.
We should definitely have Lou on at some point too. I think we've already talked about that, but in a couple,
definitely
down the line, we should at least have him call in or something. That would be awesome. It can be like maybe not a live one, because that might be a bit too hard to coordinate, but yeah. He's
Yeah,
super
no,
cool.
Lou is a really interesting cat because the way he thinks about music is actually very visual. And I remember there
Yeah.
was one time, because that kind of just corresponds with what we were talking about now, is like he's the first one to like hear some sort of music and instantly be like, oh, this is like this would go perfectly with like a country western theme,
Yeah.
or if you ask him to score something, like I've seen some animated things that he did all the music scoring for, and I'm like, wow, man, like you really matched the scene to the music properly. Like he'll pick the right instrumentation for the right vibes and stuff like that, and I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I remember like a long time ago, I came across this article, and I can't remember who showed it to me or how I found it because I've been looking for it ever since then. But it was like a very clear description of how specific instruments actually influence specific emotions. And the only example that I really remember is like church bells and like those kinds of sounds. Are always kind of like a haunting, creepy sound. So that's like you'll always hear that sort of instrumentation used if there's like a scene in a graveyard or something like that. Just like specific instruments that replicate a certain emotion. And I would love to find that article again, but Llewellyn kind of just has that it's like seated inside of his very being to just like understand what the right sound is to portray a certain setting or a certain emotion. And I think that's a really cool skill to have.
Yeah, it's very much, and I think there's not a well, there is crossover, but there's composing for like songs and sorry, not composing for songs, composing for like TV or a video or something is really quite a different skill than songwriting. There's a lot of concepts in that you don't like. I've been watching a guy named Sideways. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like he's got a YouTube channel. It's all about film scoring, but some of the actual concepts and content that he talks about is really, really interesting because it does relate to music writing as well. And there's a lot of music theory that's it's the same, but he talks about like leitmotifs and that kind of stuff where it's like in songwriting it's like a chorus and a melody, but in composing it's like a simpler motif. And you repeat that, and then it's also paced based on the video. So like the song it's not a song. It's whatever the visual component is. It has to be reacting to that. And so the tempo and the cadence may be entirely might not be anything like how a song would be based on a grid, 16, 32, all that kind of stuff. It may be completely unstructured, but there are some concepts that are similar. And I'm actually, this guy I'm binging his content. I don't know if you ever find a creator and you're like, oh my god, this is like. Yeah. Exactly the stuff I need. Because he basically does reviews of like, anything. It can be like a musical or it can be, but it's just the music theory of it and kind of how it, when they wrote it and kind of stuff and how it relates to, the concepts and if they're doing it properly or not. Sometimes he'll be ranting about it, but yeah, composing, that's something that Lou is, he did go to school for like an art school for that to a degree, but it's definitely something that was just kind of in him from the start because I remember he had a show reel a while back that he sent me and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. It's just like everything I feel like the key to a good composer is they almost know what is in other people's heads when they watch something. And most people don't know, but the thing is this person is so knowledgeable about how instruments, concepts, and writing should be that they are able to put something down that other people, it's almost as if it was already in your head, but you couldn't like visualize it. So yeah, and
it's
that's
so
where
natural. And then on the other side of it, like you ever see something that was scored badly and you're just like, what were you doing, man? Like this is completely the wrong sound and vibe for what's happening right now. And it's just like, yeah, so it's really interesting, that skill, sound design and film scoring, because yeah, just like you said, it's like when something is done properly in that way, it's like, of course those sounds are the ones that they're using. It's like it couldn't possibly be anything else. Like it's almost like it's like, yeah, they're telling me what I would have like subconsciously been thinking about, but they already know that that's like what it's supposed to be.
and that whole idea of like a sound designer or a Foley artist or a composer being almost unnoticeable because it so works with the video that it just complements everything on that you don't even think about the audio. It's just pushing whatever visual component is happening, and you don't even question it. You're just completely, suspend disbelief. Because I mean, what most people don't realize is like almost, I would say, if you take a look at most most movies made in TV shows that aren't like, something like a Marvel movie, for example, most of the sounds you're hearing in that were not recorded on set. Like probably 95% of them. Like, I mean, the vocals, there may be ADR and you don't even notice. There's probably less ADR than normal because that's a really hard one to do properly. But like almost every other sound that you're hearing is literally recorded by some dude with a bunch of random objects, banging them together and just getting the sound so dialed that he can trick people into thinking it's real. I mean, and you have to do that for CGI. So all those CGI scenes, it's not like they have any audio for that. You got, Foley artists it's a crazy breed, but that's similar in that they're recreating real sounds, which is probably even harder because you have to get past the uncanny valley.
Yeah, and you know what the really cool thing about Foley artists is they make sounds that are not supposed to be what they are actually sound more natural than what it really would be. And by that I mean, for example, like I remember watching this documentary on how they were like filming like gun scenes in movies, and like they, someone would fire a gun and then they got a Foley artist to fire the exact same gun, but like the sound of that gun recorded is not doing justice to what like you would expect it to sound like when watching the movie. So when you hear gunshots in movies, a lot of the time they're actually using cannons to make those sounds, and that's what gives you that like explosive low bass that you're not actually going to get out of a gun. But that's like what you expect to hear, so they will actually add like extra into the sound so that your expectations of like the power of a gun sound actually matches what you're hearing when you're looking at it. And then other things like rain, like you can't really record really good rain, like it's actually quite difficult, and so they'll use sizzling bacon instead, and like that's like an easy way to get rain sound.
Another really good example is metal, like swords swinging around don't make any sound, but in every single thing it's like sing sing sing. It's like, but the thing is, you don't even, your brain's like, oh, that's just normal. It's like, no, that's not.
that's not right at all. Air doesn't have a metallic tinge in it. And like the classic like face punch sound, or I guess it could be in any punch, but the classic sound you get of a punch, that's actually someone smacking lettuce on a countertop.
Punches, like getting punched doesn't really sound like anything. Like if you go to like a karate or like I mean, you probably can talk about this a lot, but like mixed martial arts, it does not sound anything at all like what you would expect.
No, if there is an audible sound, then that person's probably knocked out. Like it's not like something that really makes sound unless you're wearing like cabbages on your hands. It's Could you imagine? Just fill your boxing gloves with cabbage just to get that extra like.
They would last like 1 minute. It would last like 3 punches, and then there's just cabbage all over the ground. You have to go to the corner and get more cabbage. It'd probably dramatically increase the cabbage industry if every fight was done with cabbage.
Oh yeah.
But they would have to
like, hold on, time out. I got to replace my cabbage.
Maybe they could have like little turkeys that go around and eat all the cabbage after it falls in the ring. Something like that.
we could create an entire like self-sustaining ecosystem of boxing matches and turkey raising if we just used cabbages.
As close.
All boxing matches in the future are held at farms. What are we talking about? Does anyone have any questions? Let's revert to chat. We've derailed pretty hard here.
Something I did want to bring up as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say we like questions, so ask
yeah,
me. But
and I feel like we're kind of winding into it. We're about an hour in, but something I wanted to talk about is right now we're doing essentially a live version, and we have a bunch of like back catalog ones as well. And what I've kind of wanted to do is actually still release them on Twitch and essentially have like a before and after where it's live, and that way it's not just like in a vacuum kind of thing. So if anybody thinks they would be interested in that, just let us know. It's a little bit extra work versus just releasing it as a podcast.
Let us know.
Oh my god, dude.
Like cabbage.
Yeah, lettuce, cabbage. But yeah, let us know if you think that would be something you'd be interested in. And essentially, it would just be, it's like a premiere, like a YouTube premiere. But then we would basically jump on before, before or after, to kind of chat about it a bit more. And so, actually, something that we didn't even mention is next episode is our big interview with AU5 that we recorded a long time ago. And I've been editing it and just laughing my ass off. There's so many good points. It's a pretty long one. I think it's about an hour and 30 minutes. But so that will be next week at around now, I guess, next week probably.
Exactly a week.
Yeah.
A week minus an hour from now, the AU5 interview will be up as our 5th episode. We planned that very carefully.
Yeah.
And then the one after that, we were interviewing AU6.
Yeah, I actually created a new identity for that, and I'll be AU6. We should actually do that and change my name down there to AU6. That would be pretty funny.
And then we'll pre-record a video of you responding to questions so that there's 2 angles of you, and then we'll just sync it up to us asking.
That's a lot of work. That
is a lot.
I'm
of work.
down to do.
Yeah, it would be pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
You interviewing yourself with pre-recorded answers. But yeah, AU5, that was an amazing interview. We had a lot of fun with that one because that guy is I mean, anyone who listens to electronic music knows who he is. He's just a wizard when it comes to knowledge about sound design, and also loves tangents just as much as we do. So we went down quite a few rabbit holes regarding like everything between like DJing and sound design and just like production in general and like songwriting and genres, and I don't even remember all the things we talked about, but we went through it all, and like to the point where like we'll probably have another interview with him as well because like there's just so many more things that we can talk about.
Yeah, and hopefully we can do that live.
Actually.
That's going to be complicated, but like I think we can probably do this live with a call in. I mean, it's not a lot harder than what we're doing right now, so. And this wasn't that hard.
Yeah. No,
if you're wondering what the fuck's going on, just watch episode 1 where we're setting up for this, and this setting up for this back in May. And I don't if you haven't seen it already, it's essentially us just ranting because of how frustrating this system is to get up and running. And it's been an iterative process since the beginning. I mean, in like up to last week because we were trying to get the new system working and it didn't, so we fell back to our backup system. But it's still quite easy. I think we only prepped in. It only took us 30 minutes to get ready. So.
Oh, that was with 2 blue screens. It took us 6 minutes to actually get set up.
Yeah, I guess that's right. So, yeah, and you had to get OBS set up from scratch, the other version. And also for anybody that doesn't know, Mike's in Toronto, I'm in Vancouver. That's why this is complicated. If we were in the same city or the same room, this would be way easier, but we're not. So, and we like to also bring in a guest and have him up here, me down there, and then the guest to the right, and have us all be able to talk as well as go out to Twitch at the same time. So. That's where
it's a lot of routing, but if anyone has spent enough time learning routing, it's us, because we have literally tried every single possible configuration in order to get things running smoothly. So it's been an adventure to say the least.
So really excited about releasing the A5 one next week. We've got other guests as well that we'll probably be releasing either once a month or maybe even sooner. I think the weekly cadence is actually pretty reasonable. So I think doing this weekly, at least for the indefinite future, is totally doable. And if you have any questions or whatnot, just feel free. We've got our Discord as well. I'm on there a lot. You can ask a question there. You can join if you want to get notifications, or on our Instagram as well.
The link's down below on pretty much whatever platform you're on. It'll be down below. Yeah.
If it's on the podcast viewer, though, I haven't figured out how to do the formatting, so it's all just like one line.
Yeah, it's
so you just see all
there
the links
somewhere.
You can copy it.
You know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was there anything else you wanted to catch up before we call it quits here? Or I mean, I think we're really hoping to push to 100 subs on YouTube. We've just starting, so we're only at like 10 here. We didn't want to use either of our channels. We kind of wanted to create one that was separate, and then that way we can get like a personal URL, which is like the first milestone.
Yeah. So a little call out to anyone who's watching right now. If you could do us the favor and just sub on YouTube, that would help a lot, because there's nothing like trying to brand as, hey, go to youtube.com/u ? equals 36795.
It's a lot of numbers. It's quite long. That's why, yeah, we just click on the link. If you could do that, we would really, really appreciate it. And it would just be kind of a good start to kind of get things to. Who is this?
And Marskin Bueno. Yeah, I've actually invested most of my my stonk portfolio into Down Dog, but I've heard Up Dog's on the rise, so I might short some Up Dog.
Wait, shorting means you're expecting it to go down, so you're trying to lose money?
Yes.
Stonks.
Yeah, no, Up Dog's on the rise. I expect it to crash. I'm going to short it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Dogs
Dogs don't know how to drive. They crash regularly.
That's not true. I've seen a couple GIFs of dogs driving. I saw one where it was dog driving a motorcycle, which is insane, and it was going like 50 kilometers an hour, and there was no humans touching the handlebars. It was just a dog sitting, and there was 2 humans behind him.
Kidding.
I'll see if I can. Yeah. It was in like Indonesia or something,
insane.
which makes sense. But like, I'm like, holy fuck, like that's so crazy.
Wow. I wish I could train my dog to chauffeur me around.
Yeah, I don't. You have a
That
small
would be pretty
dog, don't
epic.
you?
Yeah, but I mean, like, as long as he can reach the handlebars, then he can do the thing. Although
When you have to like
they don't
stand
have
on the handlebars.
thumbs.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess so.
just like
Yeah,
throw
my-
him
my
down to
dog's
hit the
too
brake.
small.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So no pupper chauffeurs for me.
No. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? I mean, you're going to do a feedback stream after this.
Yeah.
And then
So
maybe the
so
rest of the week.
tonight. Yeah. So we're gonna take a little break here. I'm gonna come back after we set some things up. So I will be doing feedback tonight. So if anyone wants to send over some songs, you can email them to demos@kotekmusic.com, or you can just send me a link during the stream or whatever. Like, it really doesn't matter. It's not like there's so many people sending them that I really need to, like, divert it all to one place. But yeah, if you have anything you want me to listen to, and if you want like extremely overly detailed song analysis where I just kind of rip everything apart down to like the sample level scale, then by all means come by and I will cheese grate your music.
You definitely need, you know how movies will have like reviews and they'll say like such and such, like feedback based on like what people have done in the past. You definitely have to be like the most incredibly complicatedly simple sound design feedback of all time, and then like the person that does it, you should have like a little set of things like that, because every time somebody comes to your feedback sessions, they're literally blows their mind. They're like, you're actually discussing exactly what's wrong with my track and explaining it, and then also showing me how to fix it. Whereas like most of those, I mean, not most of those, but most people don't go so deep. And like, you know, it's normally just like a light, like, oh, this is good, like you should work on these things. But you literally, if anything, it's almost detrimental, because you'll spend like 30 minutes on a track, but like make it perfect. And if everybody waits their turn, it's like so valuable. So wait your turn is worth it.
Yeah, like, well, that's just the one thing, because like I don't know, like I like to have something to say, and a lot of the times, just like you mentioned, whenever I go to a feedback stream, like it'll either be like, oh yeah, this is really good, I like what you're doing, or it'll just be like you know, like, oh, need to work on the mix, kick could be louder. Yep. You know, sort of thing. But yeah, so I'll do my best to try and dig in and see if there's anything that I think about it, and help direct you towards the future of enlightenment. Yeah. But I think that wraps us up for today. This was a good experiment in the live show production, and
it worked.
And next time, yeah, it worked. We didn't have any issues. But yeah, once we get this thing like really rolling, like it'd be sweet to have some viewer questions. So like, you know, if you're ever watching the show and you have something you want to know about or something you want us to talk about, like related to anything, you know, anything to do with audio or sound or I mean, let us, you know, just ask, and we will we'll give you our unfiltered
let
insight.
us know.
Let us know in the chat. I'm gonna have to make a lettuce emoji now.
I was just about to say that. There has to be maybe a lettuce hands emoji. You know what it should be? It should be the prayer emoji, but 2 lettuce.
2 lettuces, or just salad fingers.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, pretty
man.
much.
All right.
Yep. So I think that's pretty good. In terms of like future topics, I was gonna say I'm still waiting to get on the Ableton 11 beta, like 4 weeks later. But when I do, we're going to have a
man.
whole episode about that for sure, because there's so much to talk about. Is there an NDA? Do you have to not talk about it, or?
I didn't sign anything.
Oh, well, but when you set up, when you create your...
It's good now.
It's good now? Okay.
I mean, I don't know like specifically, but I imagine it would be, because I know that some people had it before they released the beta, like Slink and Mr. Bill. They had access to it beforehand, and I remember once they released the Ableton Live or 11 advertisement, like the preview video. Then Mr. Bill was like, now I can use it on Twitch, and I'm like, okay, so now obviously they signed some NDAs, but we're good now, so we can definitely talk about it.
Awesome. Well, fingers crossed. I'll get the pink icon. I saw it on yours when we were on Parsec, and I'm like, oh my god, I want it so bad. I check it every single day. So.
Yep. And soon. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for coming by, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks for watching. Bye.